I'm Emily Sanders, and this is my Module 2 observation presentation for EDUC 508, Art in Math and Science. I observed a lesson on the teaching channel, and in this intentional observation, it was all about building scientific ideas with interactive read-aloud books. The lesson objective was to use nonfiction text to learn about scientific models. The inquiry questions were, how can we use informational text to support scientific thinking, and how do we help students critique science ideas and representations in books? The classroom setting was general education, a classroom of 21 students who were a combination of first and second grade. The school was Cedarhurst Elementary School in Burien, Washington, and it was a science lesson. The children were learning to use nonfiction text to learn about scientific models. The teacher's name was Fallon King. Cedarhurst Elementary School is part of the Highline Public School District, and this particular school has 702 students in grades kindergarten through 6th grade. 78.5% of the students are on free or reduced price meals, and over 45% of the students are Hispanic. 19% of them are Asian, 16.3% Caucasian. And this particular school has teachers who have a high percentage of master's degrees. 77.1% of the teachers have master's degrees. In this lesson, the teacher's using a book called How Do Apples Grow, and it's an informational book about apples. The teacher chooses a pre-planned piece of the text and a teaching point. She basically focused on just one page in the book which talked about the structures of leaves. The students were learning about this and were learning how these structures send nourishment to the leaf. The teacher then asks the students to turn and talk to each other and share their ideas after listening to her read. Students share their answers with each other, and this helps them to understand different perspectives, add on to their partner's talking points, and to think critically. Some of the strategies used were depiction, where they're observing and interpreting the teacher, and they're looking at the different models of apples and the leaves. There was extension and projection, where they're applying knowledge that they know about leaves to other models that they are drawing later in the lesson. There was reformatting, where they're reconceptualizing and they're seeing the information in a new context by creating their own diagrams. And mimicry, they're trying to create their own drawings to interpret these concepts. When the class was talking about the food and the sugars that leaves need for nourishment, one student asked, why are they eating sugar if it's bad for you? This was an interesting comment that inspired a conversation with comparisons about the sugar in plants and the sugar in our food, and encouraged students to make comparisons and to identify similarities. Students used what is called a zoom-out box in their work to draw a bigger picture of some of the smaller structures. They labeled the parts and shared them with peers. These work samples show that students were able to create scientific models on their own and to use evidence-based reasoning. Some students went back and opened up the book and showed where they found the information that they used in their models. I observed a number of artistic thinking routines in the student work and during the lesson. At some point earlier in the lesson, the teacher provided real leaves for the students to look at and make observations. And students listened to each other to learn different perspectives and learn to disagree appropriately when they were talking about what they were observing with the leaf and how they thought they could add it to their model. In terms of their questioning and investigating, they were really conducting their own research as they were working on their models. Some students were looking in the book, others were looking at the sample on the board, and others were talking to the teacher. Students were making observations using words involving colors, shapes, and lines for their models, and many of them were connecting what they knew before with what they know now. So they were looking at their prior knowledge and accessing that and saying things like, well, I used to think this, but now I think that. So they were making connections between new ideas and their prior knowledge and connecting their knowledge with other models that were on the board as they shared their work. 21st century skills are starting to be a part of my classroom, and I'm starting to use the 4 C's, critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration in my lessons, and I'm looking for new ways to put them into all the subjects that I teach my students. I am beginning to use math, science, and art strategies, especially depiction and drawing, illustrations, models, extension and projection, applying knowledge, predicting outcomes in my science lessons with my students. And at this point, I teach kindergarten, so I'm not using the strategies of reformatting and metaphor. Students will learn those as they get older. My school district is committed to adapting the Common Core and the new science standards. However, unfortunately, there are some challenges to using these strategies in the classroom that I've identified. The biggest one is lack of time. I teach kindergarten, and even though it's an extended day, it's still a shorter school day than some of the other grades. And there are many interruptions in our schedule with special events and different activities that occur a few times during the year or assemblies, and sometimes our time gets cut short in the subjects that I'm teaching, and sometimes the kids say may miss a science lesson that day or something like that. There's a lack of support. We have large class sizes, and our primary classes do not have assistants. So, because of the limit of staffing, sometimes it is hard to facilitate some of these lessons, which require more freedom on the part of the students. In terms of lack of resources, we don't have as much technology in the kindergarten level as some of the older grades do. We're working on getting that, so I'm hopeful that that's going to change soon. There is also a lack of training. Not all of the teachers are trained in the new science standards and in the artistic and scientific and mathematical strategies that we're studying in this class, so some of the teachers are less knowledgeable about these things. But in spite of these challenges, I'm hopeful, and I'm working to integrate these strategies into my classroom and my teaching practice. In thinking about artistic strategies and artful thinking routines that we use with our students, I'm observing a lot of positive changes, mostly due to the flexibility in the delivery of different learning strategies for different students. As teachers, we observe a lot of different learning styles, and when we see these different learning styles, they will require different teaching strategies for particular students. Some examples might be that sensing learners need to use their senses to experience the learning, or intuitive learners need to have time to explore abstract thinking, or visual learners need to use pictures or diagrams, sketches, schematics, and graphs. Verbal learners need to have concepts explained or use the written word and use symbols. All students must have opportunities to learn, question, think critically, explore, and develop innovative and creative ways of thinking.